Today's video is all about how much it costs to stay for a full month in Istanbul. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Gillian. We're a Canadian couple who saved and invested our way to financial independence. That means I was able to retire from corporate life in my 30s.
And I was able to retire in my 40s. This means with this new financial freedom that we are able to pack up our lives, pack up our two little dogs, and head off on the road for a life of slow travel and adventure in Europe.
We've stayed for a full month here in Istanbul, and during today's video we're going to break down dollar by dollar how much we've spent, which will give you a good idea of what it costs for this life of slow travel.
The first cost that we're going to share is accommodation. And of course, this is always the largest cost when you're traveling. We always like to stay in an Airbnb because we can be really comfortable over a long term, and also it makes it financially sustainable. So for this trip, for 1 month in Istanbul, we spent $980, which works out to be about $35 US per night for 28 nights. And the place we've stayed in was really amazing. We're in a very local neighborhood. We'll share a link right up there so you can take a closer look at the apartment. We did a full tour of our Airbnb here, but it was very comfortable, provided everything we needed. It was close to the busy area of Istanbul, yet still far enough away and in sort of like a very neighborly area that we could get to know the local fruit vegetable vendor, get to know the local baker, and just feel very much at home in our little one-bedroom apartment here.
The next category we'll cover are groceries and household items, which came in at $258 US. Now, compared to our previous grocery bills in Singapore, where we were living just a couple months ago, this was extremely reasonable, and I put that down to two reasons. One, certainly the value for groceries is way better. Money goes a really long way. We'll go down to pick up some produce, come back with a whole bag full, and it'll be like $5 US, quite remarkable. But the second reason is, we have to admit we've been eating out quite a bit more. It's been hard to resist all the delicious food, which we'll get into in the next item. Something to be mindful of when you're traveling is that water is not always potable in different cities around the world. So in this case, part of that grocery budget went towards our water, which was $30 US this month.
Our most exciting line item this month is, of course, restaurants. So we were eating out often twice a day, certainly once a day. This included eating in restaurants and also doing a lot of takeaway. And I have to tell you, the food was amazing. So you get a little bit more detail in our slow travel video, which I will link up right there, which shares the highlights of all of our time here in Istanbul. But just to give you the recap, we have had amazing Turkish breakfast, which is just an incredible feast of all sorts of little dishes, olives, honey, cream, various cheeses, just spread out in front of you. Actually, it's very difficult to finish in one sitting. And we've also had all kinds of interesting street food.
Like sheep's head, which is something we never expected to try, but in the end it was quite tasty. We even went back a second time. As well, all kinds of kebabs, which are often served in these flatbread wraps that are really delicious. And of course, let's not forget the amazing desserts. Our next category is dog expenses, because the poodles need to eat too. So this month, the total was $49 US, the bulk of which was made up of their food.
Our next category is entertainment, and this is of course one of the most interesting categories because this covers many of the experiences that we had. Of course, not everything is paid. We did a lot of stuff for free, like walking around, just enjoying the culture, the street life, but we did pay for some things. So when we first arrived in Istanbul, one of the things that we wanted to do, as we do in every city, is take on a free walking tour. And this helps us just get oriented. We have the opportunity to talk to a guide, to understand a little bit about the culture, understand the different sites, a little bit of the history. This is of course not exactly free, because the right thing to do is to tip your guide after the tour, which we did of course, and the amount is really up to the individual. Another exciting thing that we did was a food tour. So we've mentioned in our previous videos, we had our slow travel video, we've talked a lot about the amazing food that we had. A great way to get introduced to the food of a city is of course do a tour with a very knowledgeable guide. So we were able to go through some of the back streets of Istanbul, try some things we had never even considered trying before, like sheep intestine sandwiches, just to get a sense of some of the different flavors that Istanbul has to offer. And it was so great to do the tour because then we could go back again to those restaurants later in our trip and know what were our favorites already.
Possibly one of our favorite days was the day we went out on the Bosphorus River for a cruise. Now this might sound expensive, and I suppose there's some operators that were, but we found one that was just $4 for just a lovely 2-hour float down the river. And as we went along, it was just amazing to see all the stunning buildings along the way. We were constantly looking at the map saying, oh, what palace is this? What is that? And those gave us some new destinations that we could check out later on in our trip as well. Next up is our fitness category, which we spent $133 on. Now within this, it includes 2 one-month gym memberships at $30 each, as well a few sorted things like protein powder, as well as our online coaching program for weightlifting.
Just a word about the gym that we went to. Istanbul does have some very fancy, expensive, large gyms with lots of classes and all the bells and whistles. Our gym was not one of those. It was in fact a very basic gym. The equipment had probably been new about 30 or 40 years ago. But aside from that, it was actually a really nice place for us to go to every day. It was a small gym. The people became very familiar very quickly. It was just nice to have a few people to say hello to. So even though it was fairly basic, in fact, it really sort of paid off the slow travel experience because we felt at home there and we felt that we were part of the gym community.
Our next line item is transportation, which for this month was $90. The bulk of this was made up of our transportation from the airport to our Airbnb and then back again tomorrow. So we're a big fan of using public transportation, but in this case, we were arriving late at night with our 2 dogs and we weren't quite sure how welcome they would be on the taxis. So for that reason, we booked a private transfer, which was slightly more expensive, but we did discover that public transport was very dog friendly. We could bring them on the subway, we took trams with them, we took buses, we took the public ferry, and in the end, we did make our way on public transit quite a bit over the course of this month.
So that covers off all of our fun expenses while we were here in Istanbul. Of course, we also have some less fun, less sexy expenses, so things that we still need to spend on every single month to maintain a life on the road long term. So let's go through what those are.
So for data, we spent $31, and that includes our shared global data plan. As well, we had to top up Skype, which we use when we need to call friends and family on their landlines.
We also, of course, need to have insurance while we're on the road. So we are currently spending, between the 2 of us, $97 on an insurance plan, and that covers both health and any travel-related insurance needs we might have.
And our final expense is our small little storage locker we keep back in Canada at $116. And we talk about this in our downsizing video, which I'll link up here. That locker is just for those few personal mementos that we can't really bring with us on the road, but certainly want to keep in our lives.
So our total expenses for a whole month in Istanbul turned out to be just under $2,400 USD. So that was actually fairly affordable, we found. That's about $82 per day for 28 days, so quite a good amount. We will say that we found the cost of the Airbnb rentals to be a little bit higher than what we were expecting, but the cost of the food was much lower. So that was really great, and it allowed us to eat out quite a bit more than we normally ever would, and really get a chance to experience all the culinary deliciousness that Istanbul has to offer.
After an amazing month in Istanbul, we're headed off to our next destination, which is in southern Turkey. We received some questions about what it's like to travel with our dog. So in our next video, we're going to bring you along for the ride so you can see what it's like to travel with 2 poodles in the cabin.
So if you don't want to miss the video about how we travel with our 2 little poodles, make sure that you hit both the subscribe and the notification button and you'll be alerted when it's coming out next week. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments about our travels, anything else you'd like to know about, please let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you next time.